Hi, this is Ms. Rodriguez's class, and today we're going to learn about the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. As we've learned before, the Articles of Confederation was created to govern the newly created 13 states of the United States of America. However, citizens were quick to realize that the Articles weren't so great. Congress didn't have the power to collect or lay taxes, meaning our government was always short on cash. There was no executive branch to coordinate the work of the government, and Congress had no power to regulate trade between states or with foreign nations. There wasn't even a national currency. States like Virginia and North Carolina had their own dollar. Approval of 9 states out of 13 were needed to enact laws, making it nearly impossible to pass anything. And amendments to the article required the consent of all 13 states, meaning amendments were even more impossible. There was also no national court system to settle disputes among the states. Therefore, the Articles of Confederation created too weak of a national government, and something had to be done. Therefore, delegates from each of the 13 states decided to come together to improve upon this document. 35 men, a well-educated group of merchants, bankers, and farmers, lawyers, met in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1787 from May 25th to September 17th, a nearly 4-month-long meeting. This meeting is known as the 1787 Constitutional Convention. Though these delegates came to revise the Articles of Confederation, they ended up writing an entirely new charter of government instead. Delegates in attendance included great American figures such as Benjamin Franklin and George Washington. These men, now known as the Framers, framed the Constitution, which we know today to be our governing document. The Constitution created a more powerful national government of the United States. It established 3 branches of national government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The specific powers and responsibilities of each branch were laid out, and a system of checks and balances was put in place so that no single branch would have more power or too much authority over one another. The Constitution also resolved a few debates. One of these debates was whether or not state representation in the national legislature should be equal between the states, so 1 vote for 1 state, or proportional to each state's population, so the more people you had, the more votes you had. The Connecticut Compromise was the answer to this specific debate, which proposed a bicameral, or 2-house legislature, with proportional representation of the states in the lower house, the House of Representatives, and equal representation in the upper house, the Senate. Another controversial topic that the Constitution addressed was slavery. Although some northern states had already outlawed the practice of slavery, northern delegates went along with the southern delegates' insistence that slavery was an issue for individual states to decide and should be kept out of the Constitution. For the purposes of taxation and determining how many representatives each state should have, slaves were counted as just 3/5 of a person. This was known as the 3/5 Compromise. Here's a multiple choice question to see if you understand what's been said up until now. But even with the compromises, ratifying the Constitution was incredibly difficult. Those who supported the passage of the ratification of the Constitution were called Federalists, and those who opposed its ratification were Anti-Federalists. Federalists, including James Madison from Virginia and Alexander Hamilton from New York, wanted the Constitution ratified because they favored a strong national government to preserve order. Anti-Federalists, including James Winthrop from Massachusetts and Patrick Henry of Virginia, feared the national government created by the Constitution would be too powerful and tyrannical. Americans, after all, didn't want a repeat of British rule. The main issue Anti-Federalists had was that there was no guarantee to human rights in the Constitution. Here's another multiple choice question to make sure that you get the difference between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So how did they resolve this issue? In 1789, James Madison submitted 12 amendments to Congress. His intention was to answer the criticisms of the Anti-Federalists, and the states ended up ratifying all but 2 of them. The remaining 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights, were ratified in 1791. We're all familiar with some of the much debated rights guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, from the right to bear arms to freedom of speech. So let's go through each right now. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion, speech, petition, assembly, and the press. That means we can practice the religion we want, say what we want, come together in protest or support of something, and write what we want. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms. This one's fairly self-explanatory. It means a person has the right to own guns. The third prohibits soldiers from using private homes as quarters in times of peace. No longer can a soldier come in the middle of the night and demand bed and breakfast from you. The next few amendments relate to people's rights when accused. The fourth prohibits searches, arrests, and seizures of property without warrant or probable cause. A warrant is a document issued by a court authorizing police to do something. Probable cause is a reasonable belief that a crime has been committed. That means the police can't search you, your car, your house, anything, unless they have a warrant or a really good reason to suspect that criminal activity is taking place. The Fifth Amendment guarantees due process, eminent domain with just compensation, and prohibits double jeopardy and self-incrimination. This sounds like a lot, so let's go through each. Due process is the right to fair treatment in the judicial system, so that's fairly straightforward. Self-incrimination is essentially saying something that incriminates you that would tell someone that you committed a crime. People plead the fifth, or the right to remain silent so that they don't incriminate themselves. Double jeopardy is prohibited in this amendment as well, meaning that you can't be charged for the same crime twice. Finally, eminent domain, it states that the government can't take private property for public use unless they pay you for the property that is taken. For example, if the government wants to build a highway and the pathway happens to go right through your house, they can't take your property, but they have to pay you for it. The Sixth Amendment guarantees procedural due process and 6 provisions. Procedural due process means that the government must follow fair procedures before depriving a person of life, liberty, or property. The 6 provisions state that people have the right to a speedy and public trial, to a trial by jury, to be informed of all charges, to confront accusers in court, to produce supporting evidence or witnesses, and to legal counsel. The Seventh Amendment guarantees civil trial by jury when the value in controversy is over a certain amount of dollars. This was $20 at the time of the Constitution's writing, which was a lot of money back then, and now it's quite a bit more, tens of thousands, before you have the right to a trial in federal courts over civil suits. Also, the 8th prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. This is another amendment that you might have already been familiar with. What this means is that you can't get 20 years in prison for something like a speeding ticket. The crime has to be proportional to the punishment. The 9th Amendment guarantees the protection of rights not listed in the Constitution. This is definitely something that the Anti-Federalists wanted included. It states that there are other rights that may exist aside from the ones that are explicitly written in the Bill of Rights, and that even though these rights aren't written down, they still can't be violated by the government. It's been used mainly to stop the government from expending their power rather than just limiting their power. Finally, the 10th Amendment delegates powers not relegated to the national government, to the states, or to the people. Any power that the federal government did not have is given to the people or the states. Now,